This is a reminder to adjust your cell phone, vibrator, or other device. Notice I didn't say turn it off, I said adjust it. Now, as a sex therapist for 35 years, people come and talk to me about a range of things having to do with bodies, including the inevitable bathroom questions. And I recall early in my career, when I was still learning how to do this whole thing, that's why they call it practice, right, Bob? I remember a guy coming to see me. He had a son about 6 or 7 years old, and he was a little confused about how this whole fathering thing worked. And so he had worked out this system. He said to his kid, look, when you have to go to the bathroom and we're in public, you just tell me that you have to whisper, and I'll know what that means. Because the man didn't want to be embarrassed. He said to the kids, so you won't be embarrassed. But the man didn't want to be embarrassed. You know how some people are about bathroom stuff. So this system worked just fine for a year or two, and then apparently the boy's uncle, the man's brother, took him to a ball game to see the Giants. And round about the fourth inning, the kid had to go to the bathroom. So he said, Uncle Nat, I have to whisper. And his uncle said, well, okay, do it right here. So we have 2 days, today and tomorrow, where we're not going to talk about whispering, right? We're going to talk about vaginas and penises and vulvas and orgasms and ejaculations and even vibrators. And yes, woo. And that's great. Now, if you want to copy these slides, just go to my website, and you can do it right now if you like, if you have a device that you haven't turned off. Just go to my website. I have no idea how they got onto my website, but apparently they are. I pay somebody a lot of money for this. You can go to my website, and you can take the slides, use them, do whatever you like with them, and so there. So this is a situation a lot of us see in the office. You know, young people are concerned about their bodies. The doc here says, don't worry, our bodies go through a lot of changes during puberty. So I want to talk to you today about America's war on sex. I wrote this book originally, when Mr. Bush was president, so that's a long time ago. And it's been through a second edition. The publisher wants a third edition. And some things have changed, and a lot of things have not changed. And what I want to do today, since I don't just want to, as they say, preach to the choir, what I want to do is give you some concepts that you can take home and give you some actual conversation tools that you can go back to the office with to help you deal with the media, to help you deal with people who don't agree with you, to help you deal with community leaders whose support you want to solicit but are having some difficulty with. So the war on sex really matters, and the war on sex, the way that I define it, is about the religious right, and the way that the religious right is using the issue of sexual regulation. We complain about the religious right in a lot of ways, but they have a particular relationship with sexuality. And that's what I want to talk about. They have a particular relationship with sexuality. And they're using that relationship with sexuality to undermine secular democracy. And if that sounds serious, it is. And they're also using their relationship with sexuality to delegitimize science as a factor in public policy. And I don't have to tell you that our country right now is going through a terrible, wrenching, divisive conversation about the role of science and logic and reasoning in public policy. That problem is not going to go away this week or next week. And we really need to be literate in how that conversation is going. So that's what I want to talk to you about. Note, I want to be fair to, quote, religion. When I talk about religion for the next hour, I know that some people of faith are ass-kicking great. Deborah Hafner is one of them. Hello, Deborah. The problem with having Deborah as a friend is that it makes it hard for me to paint religion in black and white terms. So when I talk about religion for the next hour, I know that there are some people of faith, there are some institutions of faith who are not only not a problem, they are completely devoted to the same values that we have about sexuality. So when I talk about religion, those folks, I'm not talking about them. However, as we all know, there are some well-funded, highly powerful people and institutions organized under the name of religion who are causing us a little bit of difficulty. That's the people that I'm talking about. Now, we all know that if you want to get people in a tizzy, just throw the word sex into a room. And that is what the religious right does. Whenever they throw the word sex into a room, everybody faints. As Saul Gordon used to say, strong men faint, women begin to cry. You throw the word sex into a room, not us, we say sex, oh yeah, sure, pass the bagels. But for everybody else, you throw the word sex into a room and people faint, and what the religious right cleverly does is they see sex everywhere. They say, we're the ones who are obsessed with sex. No, no, no. They're the ones who are obsessed with sex, and they see it everywhere. They see sex everywhere. We see drugs to help people control their families. They see sex. We see people choosing adult entertainment. They see sex. We see research into courtship patterns and epidemiology about disease. They see sex. They see sex wherever they go. They see two guys walking down the street talking about, the history of the Crusades, and if they're holding hands, these guys see sex. So they see sex wherever they go. And that's a problem. Now, this is a famous painting. And it's by Gauguin. It's a famous painting. Painting's a little over 100 years old. If you're interested in buying this painting, you have to talk to Eric, because this painting costs $100 million. Very expensive painting. Eric, you've only got 2 of these in your house.
I didn't bring my checkbook.
You didn't bring your checkbook. Famous painting, and this is on loan from the Louvre. The Louvre is the most visited museum in the world, by the way. This was on loan from the Louvre to the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've ever been there, nice place. And it was sitting up there on the wall, minding its own business, when some lady came over and tried to destroy it, saying that it was satanically inspired. So this lady tried to destroy this painting. Not only is it a famous, expensive painting, but it's on loan. Imagine borrowing like somebody's favorite vase, and then I come over and I accidentally break it. Oops, that'd be a problem, right? So this crazy lady tried to destroy this painting, say it was satanically inspired. So that was a big news story. It's a big news story in Washington, big news story in Paris, let me tell you, and it was a big news story all over the US. So naturally, the people in charge of the TV news wanted to tell this story to the American public. So they got a photograph of the picture, just like I have here, and they were going to put it on the TV news, but there's only one problem. In fact, there's 3 problems with this picture. There's 3 problems with this picture. But there's only 3 problems with this picture if you look at this picture and you think of sex and you think that sex is problematic. If you don't think that sex is problematic, this picture is not a problem. And if you don't think of sex when you see this picture, then this picture is not problematic either. But news directors across the US had a problem. So what to do? So some clever news director, I think we need a new battery in this for the next speaker. Maybe for this speaker. So some clever news director decided, well, we have to put some headline, under the picture or over the picture. So some clever news director in Roanoke, I think it was, put this Chiron $100 million painting attack right across the middle where you see the watermelon. Not at the top, not at the bottom. kind of like putting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. And that's a great example of how the country is having to respond to the sexualization of everything and the creating a problematic environment about sexuality. You know, it's funny, people in the religious right, they complain about how we sex educators are sexualizing young people. How about sexualizing this? I used to write occasionally for parenting magazines. That's before the internet destroyed How many people actually remember magazines? Everybody with gray hair remembers magazines, yeah. Had a perfectly nice gig going with magazines, and then the internet came. Baby Talk, monthly magazine for new parents, and perfectly nice thing, you know, advice on, you know, how to help your baby get into Harvard, you know, important things like that. And so this is August of 2012, I think, this issue came in the mail, and they got a whole bunch of people canceling their subscriptions, claiming that this was pornographic. Now you have to remember, the people who get this magazine, they are new parents. They are people with babies. But apparently somebody looked at this picture and they thought of sex, and that's not okay. So that's what we're looking at. Now, organized religion claims to be morality experts, and that's a whole other talk that we could do. You know, the idea that in order for people to be moral, they have to be people of faith, or they have to be people who are involved in organized religion. That's a whole other talk. But you will agree that organized religion says we're the morality experts, and organized religion says sex is about morality. Well, that's a whole other interesting thing. Now, when people talk about morality, you know, I think about ethical decision-making, right? I think about how do you organize people so that they treat each other well, and how do you find a place in yourself where you can make decisions that fit with your values? How do you know what your values are? You know, all that stuff. But historically, organized religion says that sexual morality is about limiting choices. That sexual morality is not about how you treat other people, but it's rather about what you don't do. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And so what happens is that organized religion, when they talk about sexuality, they're talking about eliminating choices for people. And when morality becomes synonymous with religion, as organized religion wants to do as much as it can, religion acquires political power. That's where the problem really starts expanding. When religion has political power, and religion's mission around sexuality is to narrow people's choices. The democratic project is about expanding people's choices. The organized religious project about sexuality is about limiting choices. And so public policy around sexuality, when it comes from the religious community, tends to be about limiting choices, limiting choices. So America's war on sex is about one large constituency attempting to limit choices for everybody. And if it wasn't religiously based, we'd see it for what it is, which is it's a naked power grab. That's not to say that they're naked, but it's a naked power grab by one constituency attempting to control the others. And since religion gives itself permission to limit people's choices around sexuality, and since limiting choices around sexuality is a powerful political position, so organized religion, the more they can see sex, the better off they are, the more power they get. So using the vehicle of sexuality, specifically sexuality, not other things, specifically using the vehicle of sexuality, organized religion is in a position to do some pretty bad things. Some pretty bad things. And it's in their interest to do some pretty bad things. Here's a couple of people. He says, I've gained in the polls ever since I accused my mother-in-law of being a witch. Little history for you people. This is what I learned from you, Robert, history. So everybody should know about RFRA. That's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Sounds okay. It's an act to protect the free exercise of religion. Well, I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of everybody having the right to exercise their religious beliefs. That seems like a good idea. Now, RFRA is kind of innovative in that it exempts not just people, but companies from other laws, So that's that new joke about what does a fetus and a corporation have in common? They're both people, you know? So not only do, now for 200 years, you know, people had the right to exercise religion. Now, apparently, corporations, which are fictitious entities, fictitious legal on-paper entities, now companies are saying that they have the right to exercise their religious beliefs. And since a company can't have a religious belief, who would we talk to? We would talk to the owners of that company. I thought that was already covered by people. So RFRA allows both individuals and companies to assert that their exercise of religion is or will be substantially burdened by a law, and therefore that law needs to be reversed. And that's big news. That's a federal thing, RFRA, that's a federal thing. And now states all over the country are passing their own versions of this. You may remember a few months ago there was a big fuss in Indiana because they were going to pass their state version of RFRA without any protections for people of various sexual orientations, or anybody else for that matter. So here's a map of states that have already or plan to pass RFRA kinds of laws. Now, of all the amendments, the first one's my favorite. I don't know about you. Everybody should have their own favorite. This is my favorite. And there's several parts. Thank you, Karen. Karen, say hello to everybody who's so appreciative of you chairing this meeting. The First Amendment has a lot of parts to it. And the First Amendment, among other things, it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, when that was written all the way, this is even before you were born, Bob, when this was written back in the 1700s, this was amazing. This was amazing because back then, everybody had to have the same religion as the king or the queen. Everybody had to line up behind the king or the queen. And that's why we had 300 years of religious warfare in Europe, because people were really concerned. What if we have a Catholic king? What if we have a Protestant king? What if you have a Catholic king who marries a Protestant woman? Oh, what are we going to do? So that's why there was all out warfare. So the idea was, back in those days, you had the same religion as the king. And if you didn't like it, that's too bad. You had to have the same religion as the king. 1700s come along, late 1700s, the framers, the founders, they say, hey, here's an innovative idea. How about if we say everybody gets to choose their own religion? Whoa, amazing. An amazing political idea that the government is going to trust people to form their own religious beliefs, and that they're not going to consider, well, if the king is Catholic and you're Protestant, maybe you're going to be a traitor to the king. No, no, no. Brand new idea. So the framers, when they wrote the First Amendment, they say, no, Congress is not going to make any law saying that you have to be a certain religion or that you have to have a certain religion in order to be elected to public office. So no law respecting the establishment of religion, and no law prohibiting the free exercise of whatever religion you want to have. And then there's some stuff about freedom of speech, but we don't need to talk about that right now. We don't need to talk about that right now. So that's what the First Amendment says. Great idea. Innovative, progressive, great idea. Unfortunately, wouldn't you know it, some people confuse freedom to worship with the government being required to support a religious lifestyle. And that's where the trouble comes in. You know, you want to practice your religion, that's fine. If your religion says we don't believe in stopping at red lights, that might be a problem. And some people actually are saying the equivalent of, you know, my religious beliefs are infringed by your government laws saying that I have to stop at a red light. So we have to, first of all, I don't want to stop at red lights anymore, and second of all, maybe we should get rid of all the red lights. That's what RFRA is all about. And so we really need to be up on how that's going. It's a predictable use of political power, absolutely predictable. If any group could do that, they would. And in fact, that's what a group who can do that is actually doing. And so they reestablish the exceptionalism of religion. Religion gets to play by separate rules. And of course, it reinforces the idea that anybody can say that anything is a religious belief. And of course, religion is organized religion in the US, obsessed with sexuality, what's normal, how to limit it, and so on. So this is a subversion of secular democracy. Hello? This is a subversion of secular democracy. Laws that criminalize things that one group says, you know, we don't think that anybody should do that. The law is very clear. There's certain things you're allowed to do, certain things you're not allowed to do. And everybody is free to say, you know, you're allowed to eat French fries, but it's not a good idea. Everybody knows that. You know, you're allowed to do it. I did it last night. You're allowed to do it. You're allowed to do it, but it's not a good idea. That's a real common thing. But what organized religion wants to do when it comes to sexuality is say, if we think it's not a good idea, you shouldn't be allowed to do it. We need a law to prevent people from doing stuff that we think is not a good idea. So I come from California. We have some beaches. And we have a couple of nude beaches. Like thousands of miles of coastline, we have a couple of nude beaches. Now, you know what a nude beach is called in Italy? It's called a beach. So, in this great country of ours, you know, we say, look, there's a nude beach over there. If you don't want to go to the nude beach, don't go to the nude beach. But wouldn't you know that there are some people right there in California, as well as all over the country, who say, I don't want to go to a nude beach. I don't think it's a good idea. And I don't think you should go to a nude beach. In fact, I think we should get rid of the nude beaches because it's a really bad idea. So, you know, it's like that old thing, if you don't believe in abortion, don't have one, right? Or if you don't believe in gay marriage, don't marry a gay person. You know, my feeling is if you don't want to go to a nude beach, don't go to a nude beach. But under RFRA, you know, there are people who are saying the existence of a nude beach infringes my ability to practice my religion. What? Yes, that's what's going on. That's what's going on. So we have real-life examples of that. People who worked very hard, not just to dissuade parents from using Gardasil with their kids, but making it illegal for parents to use Gardasil with their kids, because it might encourage promiscuity, whatever that means. People who don't want medically accurate, factual sex education in schools. I mean, how many times has the Congress of the United States said we are not willing to pass a law requiring that all the things that are taught in sex education be factually accurate? It's amazing. It's amazing. Imagine Congress going to NASA and saying, you know, you don't really have to base that rocket to the moon. You don't have to base that on actual fact. You know, you can have some beliefs. That's good enough. So the religious right worked very hard to keep Plan B away from people by law, not by dissuasion, but by law. The religious right has been very effective at shutting down swing clubs and strip clubs all over the United States. There was a vibrant, as I describe in my book, America's War on Sex, there was a vibrant swinger community in Phoenix, Arizona, and very religious community, Phoenix, and they just shut down the entire operation through an emergency ordinance, by the way, so that there was no public discussion needed about this law. They woke up one morning and said there was a health emergency, so they had to shut down all the swing clubs in Phoenix. The government is defunding sex research because some people claim that it's encouraging immoral choices. And I don't have to tell you about the way that laws historically have attempted to limit the rights of sexual minorities, and of course continue to do so. Bike lane, good idea, sure, bike lane. Washington, D.C., the planners, they say, we need a bike lane on such and such a street. What a great idea. Well, there was this church here, see, and the bike lane was going to go right past their church. Now, in the normal pushing and shoving of liberal democracy, the people who run the church, they go to the city council along with you and me, and you say we need a bike lane, and they say, no, bike lane, terrible idea, because hard to make a left turn into the parking lot of the church. So in the normal secular democratic process, there'd be a certain amount of pushing and shoving in the city council, metaphorically, of course, a certain amount of pushing and shoving in the city council, and something would happen. Well, have you heard of this new RFRA law? Oh, Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So the church goes to the city council and they say, this bike lane, because it makes it hard for people to make a left turn into our parking lot, infringes on our religious freedom. I play my ace of trumps, you lose. And that's the bruising political battle that's being waged about lots of things. Now, that's not about sex, of course. But that's the way that these laws work that supposedly allow people the simple pleasure of expressing their religious ideas. You probably know who this is. This is Kim Davis. Kim Davis was applied for a job with the government, and she knew what her duties were going to be, and then she decided that in exercising her duties conflicted with her personal views, and so she quit her job. Oh no, that's not what happened. She she spoke to her boss and said, please reassign. No, that's not what happened either. She said, I don't have to do my stinking job. I don't have to do my stinking job. And in fact, I mean, her job in this case was even more benign than usual, because all she had to do was certify facts. All she had to do was say, yes, these people have met certain requirements. Yes. It would be like, somebody walking into your office wearing a red blouse, and they say, would you please sign this piece of paper saying, yes, she was wearing a red blouse on Tuesday. That's all that was involved. And she said, certifying reality challenges my ability to practice my religion. Now, you may remember the Janet Jackson Nipplegate. Are you old enough to remember that? Yeah? Good. So the most downloaded moment on the internet in history up until that point. Now, I had a lot of complaints about that whole Janet Jackson nipple thing, because the lighting was so poor. Right? Am I right? The lighting was so poor. You know how many times I had to go over that? I said, what? Slow motion, what? I was on TV with a guy from the Parents Television Council, and he said, it was horrible. I was sitting on the couch with my kid. I think the kid was about 10 or 12. True story. I was sitting on the couch with my kid, and now I'm forced to have a conversation with my kid that I didn't want to have. I don't know if he thought that maybe his kid didn't know that women had breasts or women had nipples. I don't know. But so what I said to him, John, I said, John, speaking as a sex educator, there's a technical word, there's a technical term for the conversations that we have with our children when we're uncomfortable. It's called parenting. But this guy says, I think you're applauding parenting. That would be a big shock to some people, This guy said, I need to be protected. As a parent, I need to be protected from having to talk to my kid about stuff that I don't want to talk about. But only about sex. Only about sex. Only about sex. So I want to talk about narratives for a second. Now, everybody knows what a narrative is, right? Because facts do not speak for themselves. Facts have to be put together in a coherent way for us to be able to talk about them. So we all know about narratives. Now here's an example of a narrative. He's saying to her, they're not boobs, they're pecs, right? So he's afraid that she has a narrative of femininity about his body, and he's saying, no, 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 we need a narrative of masculinity. You're supposed to say, wow, what an amazing cartoon here. Yeah? And so this is about the narrative, because the facts, which is the guy's chest, the facts are the same, whatever you call them, right? You know a chest by any other name, right, as Shakespeare said? But he wants to make sure that she's got the right narrative. So there's a big struggle in this country about the narrative about sexuality. And in particular, I want to talk about the shift in the narrative that we've seen in our lifetime, just in the last 20 years or so. A narrative that's been replacing the word immorality with the phrase public health danger or public health problem, public health emergency. I have a new book coming out in September of 2016 about pornography, in which I talk a lot about how it used to be that people were trying to discourage pornography by saying it's immoral. People don't say that so much anymore. Now what they say is it's dangerous. And that's a very important shift. It's a very important, no matter what the subject is, whether it's about alcohol or butter or anything else, when a culture or a subset of a culture tries to make the shift or wants to persuade the public to make the shift from immorality to public health problem. So here are some ways in which that shift is going on right in front of our eyes. It used to be porn was immoral, now it harms families. It used to be that abortion was immoral, and we still hear a certain amount of the baby killer rhetoric, but now what we're also hearing is that it causes depression and infertility, and it's bad for people, and it's, it causes bad consequences. Same thing with strip clubs that supposedly attract crime, same thing with swing clubs that supposedly spread disease. So we hear a little bit of it's immoral to go to a strip club, but more and more what we're hearing is that strip clubs bring crime into neighborhoods, they lower the property values. There was actually a lawsuit in Minneapolis where they tried, in St. Paul, where they tried to shut down strip clubs claiming that they lowered the property values. Interesting argument. That we need to get rid of a form of sexual expression because it lowers property values, and of course, property values have to be protected. As it happens, St. Paul, when they actually did the investigation, or should I say, the lawyers for the strip clubs did the investigation, turned out that the property values around the strip clubs were going up. So St. Paul had a problem with that. So these positions, they sound scientific because they talk about crime and other kinds of problems, but they're not really about science, and in fact they undermine the real value of science in public policy. And we're really getting to the point where people actually say things like, well, there's two sides to every story. Excuse me, no there's not. Some stories only have one side. I'm perfectly willing to say that there is one side to the Holocaust. It actually happened. There isn't two sides. There's one side. It actually happened. You know? Bill is wearing a tie. There isn't two sides to that story. There's one side to the story. He's wearing a tie. And take a good look, because he doesn't do that often. So, because the religious right gets to say that sex is about morality, they get to exclude science whenever they want to from public policy discussions. So for example, the idea that we shouldn't allow people to have Plan B because it has all these bad effects, or we shouldn't allow people to have abortions partly because it has all these bad effects, you know, these are knowable facts. These are knowable facts. Plan B had been used for years in Europe before any discussion in Congress about what to do about Plan B. It had been used for years. The safety data was right there. But the religious right, and I was on TV with some of these people, I know Deborah was too, a lot of us were. The other side says, well, but I just have a feeling that it encourages promiscuity. I just have a feeling that people are going to use it in a bad way. Well, these are knowable facts. But organized religion, when it comes to sexuality, has successfully excluded science and substituted the idea that, well, everybody gets to have their opinion. As Alan Leshner of AAAS famously said, you know, in America, it's a great country. Everybody has a right to their own opinions, but everybody does not have a right to their own facts. So the war on sex generates a lot of fear of sexuality gone wild, and then the religious right and its allies promises they're going to reduce the danger of sexuality. So they overstate the level of sexual violence in the country. Anybody watch those shows at 10 o'clock at night, those heart-pounding CSI type shows, you know, where some transsexual hooker is always getting murdered? You know, here's the science of it. People who watch those shows estimate that there's more violence in the United States than people who don't watch those shows. Annenberg Center has done that study more than once. People who watch the local news in any city in the United States, they estimate that there's more violence in the United States than people who don't watch the news. Interesting, huh? So the sexual disaster industry, they create the illusion that there's an other. Now, if you're old enough, you remember when homosexuals were the other, that homosexuals were stalking the country with their agenda, thank you very much, such a polite word, that gay people had this like thing in their pocket, like, excuse me, I've got an agenda, I'd like for you to sign up to this, you know. But the idea 30 years ago is that homosexuals, not people, homosexuals, that homosexuals were kind of stalking the country, and if you weren't careful, if you didn't keep your husband home at night, one of them might grab your husband, you know, turn him into a gay person. Because back then, homosexuals were the other. Before that, we had communists. Before that, we had Jews. Don't get me started on Jewish communist gay people, because that's a real problem. So homosexuals were the other. Now pornography users are the other, or pornography itself is the other. People who are into queer, trans, that whole blurring of traditional gender categories, now they're perceived as the other. So the result is a sex panic, which was rejected as the title of my next book. I don't know why, Sex Panic, with an exclamation point, sex panic. And demands for action. What are we going to do about that sex panic? What are we going to do about that sex panic? So in my book, America's War on Sex, I talk about the battlegrounds in the war on sex. These are familiar to you: reproductive rights, the internet, sexual minorities, sex research. There are people elected to our Congress who say that there is no good reason for any research having to do with sexuality. And of course, they define sexuality as broadly as they can. Psychotherapy is a battleground in the war on sex. There are people who are trying to tell psychotherapists what they can and cannot say when it comes to sexuality. And the goal of the war on sex is to restrict whatever makes sex safer or easier or more comfortable or more pleasurable or more understandable. In other words, anything that makes sex more normal, anything that makes sex just like everything else. That's the agenda of the war on sex. Preventing people from relating to sexuality the way that they relate to everything else. Preventing people from using their good decision-making skills, their good ethical values, their ideas about I want to be healthy, their ideas about I want to be safe. Henry, show the Robertsons that funny face you always make when you climax. This is... This, I love the guy's pants. This is how it should be, right? This is how it should be. I mean, you know, some of you, we don't want to see the face that you make when you climax. We'd be scared. But how nice to live in a world where people can talk about sex the way they talk about everything else. The strategy of America's war on sex is to shape the cultural narrative about sexuality. We have our narrative, they have theirs. I think Saul Gordon would have appreciated that. We have our narrative, they have theirs. And the idea is to create and sustain a moral panic. I don't know, Deborah, if you remember this. Deborah was on Bill O'Reilly a few years ago. Do you remember this? So Bill O'Reilly starts out being very reasonable. He's Deborah's best friend. Starts out being very reasonable. Of course, kids need sex education. He says, but there are limits. Well, that's when the trouble starts. There are limits. And Deborah used the word on national television, uterus. Do you remember this? Deborah used, you do this so often, I don't know how much you remember, right? So Deborah uses the word uterus. I thought Bill O'Reilly's teeth would fall right out of his mouth. He says, now, Reverend, you're over the line. He says, you use a word like that, it robs children of their innocence. I've told this story about 5,000 times. Robs, this word, these magic syllables, rob children of their innocence. And if you look through that, what you see is the creation of a moral panic. Every parent watching that show kind of sits up and says, wait, I don't want my kid to lose their innocence. My kid's only 17 years old. I don't want my kid to lose their innocence. Bill, what should I do? Oh, who's the problem? Oh, that Reverend lady. There's the problem, trying to steal my kid's innocence. There's the nuts and bolts of a moral panic right there. So I hope that everybody in our field is familiar with this concept of moral panic and can use that expression in a sentence. When you're talking to the media, when you're talking to our colleagues, when you're talking to people who don't agree with us. So how do you shape a sexual narrative? How do you take facts? How do you shape a sexual narrative? Well, for starters, I use the word dangerism. Feel free to copy that. I use the word dangerism, sort of a philosophy of how you think about sexuality. I use the word dangerism, and the Talmud, which I quote all the time, the Talmud said, the only thing I ever say from the Talmud is that the Talmud says if you can get people asking the wrong questions, it doesn't matter what answers they come up with. So what are the problems that we're facing in this country about sexuality? Well, what's the problem? Well, if you think we have a gay problem, that leads to certain possible solutions. If you think we have a porn problem or an indecency problem, if you think we have an immorality problem, the universe of solutions to those problems is circumscribed, right? So, but what if instead of saying we have a gay problem, we said we have an intolerance problem? That's a totally different problem that leads to totally different solutions, right? We're about to hear all the stuff about the war on Christmas and how this country is making war on Christians. So when people say there's an anti-Christian bias in this country, that leads to certain proposals. But if we say that we have an anti-secularism problem, that leads to a completely different universe of solutions. So when someone is trying to get you to debate the wrong question, change the question. When someone is trying to get you to solve the wrong problem, don't solve the wrong problem. When someone says, what are we going to do about the abortion problem? I think, the main abortion problem we have is that people who provide abortion are not safe, and people are not being trained to provide abortion. No, that's okay. That's okay. You can become a gynecologist nowadays without knowing how to do a D&C. That's crazy. That's crazy, right? So there's your abortion problem. So when people say, we have a promiscuity problem, I don't think we have a promiscuity problem, and I'm not going to talk about what to do about the promiscuity problem. I'm going to talk about the moralism problem. The whole idea that people think there is such a thing as promiscuity, and that people feel that promiscuity should be measured in terms of how many vulvas have you put your penis into. or vice versa. So don't go solving the wrong problem. Don't go letting people sucker you into trying to solve the wrong problem. What's another way, what's another technique that the war on sex is prosecuted? Well, they use phony categories. Now, we're among friends here, so let me ask you a serious question. Don't you think we ought to do something about all those people who are murdering other people or keeping library books overdue? That's a phony category. That's a phony category. Everybody thinks we should do something about people who either murder or keep their library books overdue. It's a phony category. Let's look at some other phony categories. Porn and child porn. That's a phony category. Those of you who are old enough to remember Joycelyn Elders, Joycelyn famously talked about letting kids know in school that masturbation was okay. Well, some people said she wants us to teach kids how to masturbate. She wants to teach kids that it's okay to be molested. Childhood masturbation and being molested is a phony category. Birth control and abortion is a phony category. When people say, and those sex educators, they want to teach kids facts and how to masturbate. Wait. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that we are actually wanting to teach kids facts and how to masturbate. At least that's not on my curriculum. There are people who are saying that, you know how many teens are approached on the internet for sex? Yeah. And almost all of them are being approached for sex by their friends. So being approached on the internet by your friends who say you want to hook up, and being approached on the internet when you're 7 years old by someone who says, do you want to come with me and have some candy? Those are two entirely different phenomena. But if you put them in the same category, you will get a lot of people paying a lot of attention and say, oh my God, what are we going to do about that? So here's some other ways that the war on sex is prosecuted, the strategies. Here's a really old-fashioned technique. Some people don't care. When we talk about sex education, some people don't care if children are molested. I'm not one of them, but some people don't care. That's a rhetorical device that the religious right uses all the time. Some people don't care. Some people don't care if every teenager gets pregnant. I mean, do you recognize our industry in that? That we don't care? We're so interested in everybody having sex, we don't care if everybody gets pregnant. What? So some people don't care. Again, creating a them. And we're the them. We're the them. If you're the religious right, we're the them. Claiming that victimization equals expertise. We see that, for example, if you remember Donna Rice Hughes, who sat on Gary Hart's lap. Here's a real oldie, right? So she claims that her marriage was destroyed by infidelity, so now she's an expert on infidelity. So Oprah was the real pioneer on this. She has a lot to answer for when she gets to see her maker, and this is one of them. The idea that victimization gives people expertise. We have to be very careful about that idea, that victimization gives people expertise. And another idea is that everybody is a victim of the sex industry, whether you are a customer or not, however you define the sex industry. Very popular idea right now, that there's a sex industry out there that is transforming everybody's life and not for the better. So in my observation, sexuality is for traditional organized religion. Sexuality is a nightmare for organized religion and has been, for thousands of years, because it represents personal autonomy. The Italians have a great saying, bed is the poor man's opera. Bed is the poor man's opera. I love that expression, because what they're saying is that, sexuality is a place where if you're rich or poor, if you're tall or short, if you're young or old, that's the place where you can sing your opera. Other things in life, you don't get to do them if you don't qualify. Certain things you need money for, certain things you need a special youthful kind of body for, certain things you need a certain gender for. When it comes to sexuality, none of these things apply. Everybody gets to sing their own opera. And that's why totalitarian regimes hate sexuality. I'm not aware, and I study history a lot, I'm not aware of any totalitarian regime that has ever been sexually progressive, because they don't want people to have that experience of personal autonomy. Now, when Bill asked me to give this talk, I said, well, Bill, I don't want to preach to the choir. And he says, well, I'm sure you'll think of something to say that will piss people off. No, that's not what Bill said. No, that's what I heard. That's not what he said, but that's what I heard. I just want to mention for a minute that we need to be careful about the war on sex from the left. We need to be careful that we are not participating in that ourselves, or that our allies are not participating in that. The idea that, some people say, well, I believe in abortion under some circumstances, but not others. And by the way, everybody who says that, they always seem to have an idea of how abortion should be restricted. They don't say, I think abortion should be restricted under some circumstances, but you decide. No, that's not what they say. I would invite you to look at the Yes Means Yes movement. Now it's enshrined in law in California. There's a lot of problems with Yes Means Yes, particularly if you want drunk 19-year-olds to implement it. I do psychotherapy and couples counseling with grown-ups, and I don't see a whole lot of 40-year-olds who could successfully navigate Yes Means Yes. So the idea that drunk 19-year-olds can navigate Yes Means Yes, we need to do a lot more thinking about it. Now, obviously, we want to expand people's consciousness about consent. We want there to be way, way, way fewer experiences of non-consensual sex. We also want people to be able to talk about way more, to be able to talk about the difference between non-consensual sex and regret when it comes to sexuality. And if we're going to do Yes Means Yes, we need to tell our daughters, when you want to say yes, honey, open your mouth and say yes. Yeah. So it doesn't work. Yes Means Yes doesn't work if one of the parties in the transaction doesn't feel that they have the right to say yes. So we have to be raising girls to own their bodies and their sexuality, just like we have to be raising young men to learn to be way more sensitive to what means no, what means maybe, what means I don't know, what means, well, could we please talk about it? Demonizing pornography, very common thing among progressive circles, and that is not good. That is not good. There's a lot of facts, there's knowable facts about how pornography affects people, and it's not terribly negative for the most part. So let's not promiscuously demonize pornography. There's a big problem now on college campuses where due process for people accused of sexual assault has been eliminated. And that was under the direction of the federal government, but college campuses are jumping up and down about this. And progressive people on college campuses, I don't know if you remember 30 years ago or 40 years ago, the idea was that you should always believe a child when they say that they've been molested, and it turns out, no, you shouldn't. Well, now people are saying anyone who ever says, I was sexually assaulted, that we should always, always, always believe that person before we see any evidence whatsoever. That's a crazy idea. That's a crazy idea. You can't take a large number of people who say anything and assume that every single one of them is telling the truth, or that every single one of them is sober when they talk to you. That just flies in the face of common sense. So am I against sexual assault? Of course. Do I think that the majority of people who claim to be sexually assaulted were? Of course. But the idea that we should assume that every single person who says they've been sexually assaulted was, I mean, we might as well get rid of the legal system right now. We might as well get rid of the entire legal system if we're going to say that anybody who claims to be wronged was wronged. We don't say that about any other crime. So there's no reason to think that that would apply to sexual assault. Anybody recognize my friend Dan Savage? Dan Savage now is being savaged by some people in the queer community because he's not queer enough. This is America's War on Sex from the left. Anybody recognize this lady? Anybody here ever meet Germaine Greer? I never did. Yeah? Good for you. That's what she looks like now. Germaine Greer is being attacked for not being feminist enough because there are some people who don't like her position on trans women. So this is a reminder, our virtue is not measured by how much we hate vice. Although people on the religious right sometimes feel it's necessary to proclaim very loudly how much they hate vice as a way of establishing their credentials. I want to back up and show you a couple of things. This is a picture I made a few years ago, and I still like it. The onset of puberty 150 years ago was around 15 years old, and the average age of first marriage in 1850 was around 15 years old. So there was no premarital sex problem. Let's remember Romeo and Juliet, how old were they? Romeo was 15, Juliet was 14, right? In those days, those were considered adult people, adult enough to have a great romance, adult enough to kill themselves if that's what they wanted to do. That's pretty adult, right? So what has happened since 1850? The age of average onset of puberty has plummeted, and the age of average first marriage has skyrocketed. So now, the age of first marriage is approximately 27 years old in the United States, and the age of onset of puberty in the United States, give or take, is about 10 or 11 years old. So what that means is that between the age of 11 and the age of 27, most Americans have sexually mature bodies or bodies in which sexual feelings are to be expected. They're not an anomaly. And that is now the premarital sex dilemma. And what are young people supposed to do about that? Now, if people want to not be sexual during that time, that's okay with me. And I know it's okay with you. Bill has kind of rescued abstinence for us from the dustbin of history. And nevertheless, not everybody wants to be abstinent. And those people need skills. Those people need skills. You know, if people are driving when they're 16 years old, they need skills. It's not enough to say, tisk, tisk, people drive when they're 16, they don't know what they're doing, they have accidents. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. So anybody asks you why we need sex education or why are we encouraging people to be sexual before marriage or any of that nonsense, just keep in mind the widening gap between age of puberty and age of first marriage. Now, back when Gardasil was a hot political topic, this is Bridget Marr from the Family Research Council. She said, we shouldn't be giving the HPV vaccine to young women because they might feel so safe that they might go and have sex. Now, aside from the fact that I've never seen a 13-year-old girl say, hey, Kevin, I'd love to have sex with you, but I might get HPV and then I might get cervical cancer and I might die, so I'm sorry. Just like I don't think we need to worry about, you know, any 14-year-old girls or young women saying, Kevin, I got the shots, let's go do it. No, the whole problem is that that's not how 13 and 14-year-olds think. If only 13 and 14-year-olds thought like that. So Bridget Marr said something that if you don't listen too carefully, it sounds perfectly reasonable. Well, young people, they get these injections, they feel safer, they might have more sex, we got to stop that. Wait, slow down. First of all, why is stopping young people a legitimate public policy goal? I don't remember voting for that. I don't remember agreeing that that's a legitimate public policy goal. And whether or not young people are going to use Gardasil and then feel safer and then go have sex, that's a knowable fact. That's not an opinion. That's a knowable fact. Where Bridget Marr and the Family Research Council, what they said is, well, we just have a really strong feeling that that's going to happen. And since we're on the religious right, our strong feelings about sex, that needs to be considered at the policy table. I was not at the policy table. She was. Because she had a really strong feeling about that. All I had was science. I want to mention something about sex trafficking. This is This is a cover of Newsweek. Anybody remember Newsweek? This was the cover of Newsweek. And I want you to look at what it says. It says, this was an alleged new study. It was an old study, and it was done by a crazy person, which is to say I disagree with the study. Actually, I critique the methodology of the study. Plus, I don't like her. But notice what they put, a burgeoning demand for porn and prostitutes. That's a phony category. A burgeoning demand for porn and prostitutes, yeah. Warping personal relationships, there's a real neutral term. And endangering women and girls. How? How? The war on porn has morphed into the war on trafficking. The war on sex work has morphed into the war on trafficking. There are people like the author of this article, Melissa Farley. She describes herself as an anti-sex work activist. She says that every single sex worker has to be considered as a victim of trafficking. So overnight, we've gone from having this many victims of trafficking to this many victims of trafficking. And that is not okay. That is not right. It's not the way to pursue public policy. And we need to be asking about these categories. Let me, you know about sex education. You've heard of Laura Bush, right? So Laura Bush says, I always get irritated. She said she toured the country saying this nonsense. Abstinence is 100% effective in preventing pregnancy and eradicating disease. Actually, honey, no, that's not the way it works. Here's a bunch of undergraduates. Here's a bunch of undergraduates. 2/3 of the undergraduates broke their abstinence pledge. That's the way abstinence pledges work. That's the way abstinence pledges work. A lot of people break them. That's the way it works. Here's another one. This is from the Journal of Public Health. Do people keep virginity pledges? Half of 14,000 young people broke their virginity pledges. And then people who broke their virginity pledge, they deny that they broke their virginity pledge. So that's how abstinence works. And so when people say, well, abstinence works fine if people use it exactly properly, well, that's like saying French fries work if you use them properly, which is to say you don't eat them. That's how you know, French fries would be fine on my diet if I didn't eat them. Unfortunately, I eat them. Here's the deal with pornography. This is the only slide I'm going to show you about pornography. This is a graph from 2000 to 2012. Everybody here was alive in 2000. I know that. In the year 2000 is when broadband came to the United States. Overnight, and I mean overnight, everybody could get access to free, high-quality pornography. Whoa. 5 minutes. Overnight, free, high-quality pornography. Huh. I wonder what would happen if you flooded the United States with free, high-quality pornography. Now, we could sit around and chat about that. Well, gee, would everybody go on a diet so that they would look like people in the movies, or would everybody get divorced, or would everybody become gay, or, you know, what would happen? Oh, wait, we have the data. We know what happens when you flood the United States with free, high-quality pornography. We have the data. We have the data from the government, and we have the data from a lot of places in the government. We have statistics on divorce. We have statistics on violence. We have statistics on lots of things. And not only in this country, but in other countries too. So what happened? Let's not speculate. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the knowable facts. Let's look at the science. What happened in these United States when the country was flooded with free, high-quality pornography? What happened with sexual assault? The rate of sexual assault went down. The rate of sexual assault in the last 12 years has gone down at the very same time that the country was flooded with pornography. So anybody who says that pornography leads to sexual assault, the numbers say not really. What happened with divorce? Oh, did everybody get a divorce after the country was flooded with porn? The rate of divorce went down. What happened with teen pregnancy? The rate of teen pregnancy went down. What happened with child sexual exploitation? The rate of child sexual exploitation went down. Now, I am too much of a scientist to say this proves that pornography caused all these good things to happen. No. Because, repeat after me, correlation is not causality, right? However, these are facts. I didn't make this up. These are facts. This is not my opinion. These are facts. I got a lot of opinions. I'm not shy about sharing them with you. I can have my arm twisted to share my opinions. But these are facts. So if anybody says, you know, pornography is causing this, this, and that, not these things. Not these things. So that's all I'm going to tell you about pornography. Oh, and by the way, that data has been replicated now in about 15 countries. Not all of them like the US. Countries as diverse as Japan and Croatia and some other, Denmark. So by the way, what can you learn from porn? You can learn some things from porn that we don't want people learning. You can learn that sex always includes orgasms, which we know is not true. You can learn that sex does not require lubricants or birth control. We don't want people learning that. You could learn that sex does not include kissing. Oh my God, sex without kissing. Are you kidding me? It's hardly even worth doing, sex without kissing. But in porn, you can see lots of sex without kissing. But what else can you learn from porn? You can learn that people can touch their own genitalia during sex. Tons of porn has men stroking their penises and women touching their vulvas. You can learn that there are a lot of different ways to enjoy sex and that people move around during sex. They don't just like start in one place and end in that exact same place. You could learn that there's a huge range of vulvas in this world. You could learn that there are a lot, some vulvas have those, you know, big flappy lips, some have these little tiny lips, some have lips that, you know, one hangs lower than the other. Like testicles. You know testicles, one hangs lower than the other? That's so that when you walk down the street, they don't clang together. And you can learn from pornography that there's this thing called the clitoris, and that apparently women really like this clitoris thing. You could learn that from porn. So what is the religious right's response to porn is a bad sex educator? Which of course it is. Porn is a bad sex educator. Their response to porn is a bad sex educator is we need less sex education. My feeling is, you know, when parents or anybody else says porn is a bad sex educator, I say, you're right. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to provide more sex education to counter the lessons that people are learning from pornography? It's the same thing that the religious right says we live in a sexualized world, therefore we need less sex education. Makes no sense at all. So, last thing I'm going to talk about, right? Responding to moral panics and junk science about sex. If you go to the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, they issued an enormous study a few years ago. 49 state attorneys general, Connecticut was the one that was not included, plus representatives of Microsoft and Verizon and so on and so on. They issued this gigantic report that showed that the internet is really pretty safe for young people, that bullying is really the main problem, not sexual predators. But who the hell cares about facts other than you and me? Here's what matters to people, not facts. Here's what matters. Fear and loneliness, the desire to be hopeful, anger and anxiety. That's what our constituents care about. And the religious right is the primary political force that takes emotion seriously. And if you need any proof of that, has anybody ever heard of Donald Trump? I mean, this guy is almost entirely policy-free. You know, you ask him, what do you stand for? He says, I'm going to make America better and stronger and happier. And we say, yeah, how are you going to do that? He says, I guess you didn't hear me the first time. I'm going to make America better and stronger and happier. That's his whole thing. That's his whole thing. The religious right is very interested in emotion. That's what they address. And if we don't address it, if all we have is facts, people are not going to pay that much attention to what we say. So how do we help people relate to what we want to say? Well, here's what people care about when it comes to sex. They care about danger. They care about perversion. They care about their partner having an affair with somebody else. They care about the fact that they have erection problems. They care about the fact that they don't have as much sex as they did 10 years ago. The technical word for that is marriage, of course. They care about the declining quality of their sex lives. They care about whether or not their kids are safe. They care about whether or not their kids are safe. And we need to talk about that over and over and over again. Because we really want young people to be safe, right? We really do want young people to be safe. So here's the way we talk about it. Well, of course, we all want our children to be safe. And when people talk to us and they make certain assumptions, we need to say, well, you know, if you're frightened, of course you would make an assumption like that. If you care about your kids, of course you would make assumptions about this or that. The good news is that it's not true. But you know, fortunately, science does give us answers to these questions. So these are the ways that we can talk about emotion to people. It's so hard to find a balance between fact and emotion, but let's try. Let's try and talk about both of those at the same time. So these are the kinds of meta responses. You know, you and I, we care about the same things. We might have some differences about how to accomplish them, but you and I care about the same things. We want our kids to be safe, we want our communities to be productive, and we want everybody to get along. So let's remind people that we are in disagreement with about some things, that we do have some agreements with them on other things to help disarm them a little bit. This is a reminder, if you want a copy of the slides, just go to my website, martyklein.com/slides/WarrensX, and you can sign up for my newsletter on my website. There's also flyers on the table about my different books and stuff that are available. And America is embarked on this amazing journey of pluralism. And sexuality is the place where that pluralism is most in danger. And our job is to make sure that pluralism comes to sexuality as well. This shows you how important communication is. No, I said I've got acute angina. Thanks very much for having me.